So I don't play any hits. I just play the stuff that nobody's ever heard or nobody knows exists, or in some cases I didn't even know existed. But so I basically just play either really obscure songs by famous artists or famous songs by really obscure artists.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lasting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today is one of my new friends, Gilbert Neal. Welcome to the show, Gilbert.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I guess the germane thing would be to say I have a podcast from my radio show, which I do here in Hillsborough, North Carolina. I've been doing it for about 5-6 years, and it's called D-Sides, Orphans, and Oddities.
Oh.
And I moved that over to a podcast, which is dsides.podbean.com. And the conceit of the show, and if you're a Bruce Springsteen fan, you're safe from this, but the conceit of the show is to find the seedy underbelly of pop music from 1965 to 1980. And I chose 1980 as a cutoff point because if you notice, I was a musician at the time, and I noticed that drum machines and synthesizers started to take over the production, and I think make them a lot less interesting. So basically the Beatles came to America, a big explosion, and for 15 years, I examined like that part of time. So I actually did a show on Bruce Springsteen, but not the way I normally do it. Like for instance, this week on the podcast, I did a radio show last week about artists who had to try disco because they either felt that their careers were waning, or they just wanted to try it, or whatever. So I don't play any hits. I just play the stuff that that nobody's ever heard or nobody knows exists, or in some cases I didn't even know existed. But so I basically just play either really obscure songs by famous artists or famous songs by really obscure artists.
That's pretty interesting. I think that's a fun concept to play with.
Oh, it's so fun. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I never run out of stuff to play.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, do you know who Lou Christie is?
Vaguely.
So Lou Christie had a hit in 1966 with a song called Lightning Strikes.
Okay.
It was a pretty big hit. And he had a couple of hits before that and a couple of hits after that. But then after like 1970, he disappeared. But I found a whole bunch of records that he made in the late 70s, early 80s that were disco records. And no one would ever, you wouldn't put Lou Christie with disco, or like Freddie Cannon with disco,
right,
or things like that. But I find these releases, and in some cases I buy them. You like vinyl, yeah?
Yeah. Sure.
So I like vinyl, but I like the stuff that nobody wants. I'm not looking for appreciation or rarities and things like that. I did collect because it's a very short collection. Like, the band Sha Na Na.
Yeah.
Well, they had 3 members who did solo albums in the 70s, and I found those. I tracked them down. And some of them are bad, just awful. But one of the guys, Jay Jocko is actually his name. His album was produced by the guy who played lead guitar for Steely Dan on the song Reelin' in the Years.
Oh, okay.
So like there's all sorts of connections with like pop music and bad pop music, things like that.
So before I was obsessed with Bruce Springsteen, I was obsessed with, and I still remain, Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys.
Ah, yes.
That was my first musical love.
Mm-hmm.
And Here Comes the Night was the disco version they did of a song they did, and they put it out on the Light album, I believe.
Yeah, LA album,
It is it is bad.
I actually played it on my show last month.
Yes.
Because I don't know, you're a big fan
Mm-hmm.
of the Beach Boys, and I think I'm wrong. I don't think it was Reeling in the Years. I think it was another song that Elliot Randall played on. But so I am someone who is not amenable to Beach Boy apologists, which is what I call them, who say the Light album is a hidden gem, or the MIU album is like subtle with overtones of this or that. I think it's all garbage, but I still like listening to it.
So I love Beach Boy. I love You. And I know it's not a great album, but it just, for some reason, it connects to me. I can remember being excited about picking up MIU, mostly because my buddies and I loved the Come Go With Me. We like dum 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 dum, and like the Beach Boys are doing one of our favorite songs. It's great.
That album has like the song My Diane.
Yeah.
Is really, I mean, if you know the story, it's really dark. I mean,
yes.
And that's like him waking up around that period of time to write just the best song on the album, I think.
Yeah.
And the most meaningful track, and everything else is just to me, it's strange.
Yeah, I certainly recognize that Brian can be hit or miss. I love, pardon the pun, Love and Mercy, right, from his solo album. I love that song. And I recognize, I'm one of those people that the first time I bought Pet Sounds, I was used to Endless Summer and all this surfing music, and I didn't get it. And as I went on, and I know it is cliche to like, oh, I love Pet Sounds, but the reality is, it is one of the albums that if people list your top 5 albums, I definitely Pet Sounds is one of those. Yeah.
Have you ever heard Smart Girls?
I'm not sure. Okay.
Oh my God!
Okay.
So Smart Girls is another song I play. That's Brian Wilson under the aegis of Eugene Landy.
Okay.
And it's a rap song.
Okay.
Brian Wilson does this rap song about him being like the hit maker and writing hit songs with the wave of his hand. And talking about the fact that most of the girls in the songs that he wrote were not very smart. Okay. And it is just awful. Oh, it's so bad.
I will have to check. I made that.
I wish that was you, never having heard it, because I think you have something to look forward to.
I couldn't get my old body to move, which is one of the outtakes he did about exercise. I ended up buying a bootleg of Sweet Insanity, and it was a copy of a copy of a copy, so yeah, there are songs in those albums, like 15 Big Ones. There are a couple songs on there I really like a lot. I enjoy, but I also know that I'm listening from a Beach Boy Brian Wilson fan ear.
What's the one that goes? It goes down. Do you know that? That's like a takeoff on Shortening Bread.
Yes,
but it's like it's like really like strange and funky. The name of
Yeah.
it is escaping me now, but
Uh-huh.
um, they talk about. I think it's like some studio tomfoolery where
Yeah.
they're talking about like male genitals,
Okay.
basically. And it was recorded in, I think, um, um, this 71 or 72,
Okay.
and people can't quite put their finger on when it was recorded, but uh, oh, it's so strange. It's so
Yeah.
strange.
Well, and I think, I saw once this rock and roll list book I think I owned years ago, and they talked about that the recording artist that has the most unintended noise on their songs are the Beach Boys.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, that's the Rock and Roll Book of Lists.
yes.
With that one of the factoids on that was the band with the most albums released that never made the top 40 was Fatback.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about the same. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I loved that book when I was younger and did that. So that's good.
So you
Well,
probably like the Rolling Stone Record Guide too.
I did. I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, in fact, I had two guys on yesterday, Jim and Sean. They do a podcast called You're Not Listening. And the basic premise is it's a father and a son. Um, Jim brings a song, Sean brings a song, and they play it, and then they just dissect it. Like, why do I love this song? Let me explain to you why. What do I can't find about this? And so I love the idea of breaking that down and talking about this. And Gilbert, it sounds like a fun podcast where you're taking um, songs that go, this is it so bad it's good?
Mm.
Or is it, or is it just a painful, how do you push that, right?
Right. So one of the people that actually have a history with is this Lou Christie fella,
Yeah.
who grew up around Pittsburgh, where he knew of my aunt Abby Neal, and she had her own TV show, and he was a fan of hers. He actually put on an album of hers, but I'll never play it because it's too old, or it's the stuff they recorded is too old. But so he put out a 12-inch single in 1981 about the Guardian Angels. You know the Guardian Angels?
Sure.
So he put out a 12-inch of the Guardian. I have it right over here. I just purchased it. And it's awful. It's him rapping and then talking about how they saved his mother and stuff. And that's something where I'm never gonna say, there's something catchy about that Lou Christie rap song. It's bad, but it's interesting to me because I think a lot of those stars from the 60s and the 70s, even the 50s, like I think Connie Francis did one. They had to they felt that they had to resort to that. So there were like a lot of slick producers in like Germany or Los Angeles who would say, "Oh yeah, I can do that for you," and they would go get a studio somewhere and make this really slick background, and then there would be, Frank Sinatra did it. They all did it, and the Beach Boys did it.
Yeah.
So, have you ever heard of Celebration? Celebration.
I'm not sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Mike Love,
Oh yes, absolutely, yes.
So he did I think 2 albums with Celebration.
Right. The soundtrack to Americathon.
No,
right?
No, it wasn't Americathon. That
Okay.
was but they did the soundtrack to that movie they were talking about. Then they did another record.
Okay.
And then they put out an album called Disco Celebration.
Oh
which was just disco records sung by this girl who had a pretty nice voice, but Mike Love like co-wrote everything, and I think they did a version of Don't Worry Baby, which again, anything Mike Love touches, is not very good back then because he was strictly a money-making, formula guy.
Yeah.
But yo, you should dig that up. It's it's disco. It's
Yeah.
clean.
Okay.
It's got real drums playing the same thing over and over again. That's what it is. So that's the kind of deal
Yeah.
I'm dealing in.
Yeah. Like Summer in Paradise was the album that they put out that was horrible. There was nothing from Brian. You know, that's interesting. That's a thought. All right. Well, um, I always like to start at the beginning. So talk to me. Where did you grow up, and what kind of music did your family listen to?
I grew up in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
Um, excuse me. My father died when I was 6, but he had Jim Reeves albums, and uh, I can't remember the name of the band, but they had a hit with Washington Square. It was an instrumental with a banjo. But my mother really didn't listen to music.
Okay.
And one day I'm walking, I think it was 6th grade. I'm walking down the street, and there's a kid in front of me walking up from school, and he just moved in to our neighborhood, and he had the Beatles' second album under his arm. I'd never seen it, but there was something compelling about these 4 beautiful boys just just playing music, and the American the American release of that is just fantastic. It's like they did something with the mastering or something for an American audience, but it just snaps. So we would listen to those records over and over again, and we would play hockey stick band. He would play Penn drums,
Mm-hmm.
and we were probably about 9 or 10 when this happened, and I had never heard anything like it before. So since my house wasn't very the mother and father didn't sit down, and we didn't have lunch or dinner together, we just sort of scrounged for whatever we could. I spent a lot of my time, like I'm spending it now with you, is with headphones on, listening to the Beatles repeatedly, just listening repeatedly to sort of internalize the lessons. And then I moved on to Led Zeppelin, and then I moved on to King Crimson, then I moved on to this or that. And it was never, listening to it because I loved it. It was listening to it because there was something inside me that made me do it.
Wow.
So along that line, I became a musician, and I was never a virtuoso at anything, but I could hear something once and play it because I had listened to the Beatles so often and sort of knew where the notes went. Um, so I started playing in bands and things, writing songs, basically making up melodies, but not really taking a lot of time to write lyrics that were like cogent.
Okay.
But so I've put out 6 albums, and I'm working on a 7th. But I live in North Carolina now. I have 3 kids and a great wife, and they're very supportive. But that's it. It's not, music is not something I love. It's something that I have to do, including listen to it, including finding these stupid records.
Yeah. It 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 is a calling it is to a certain degree to you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like it's not even a calling. It's like a demand.
Okay.
It's like genetic. It's like, or not genetic, but it's like cellular. It's like visceral.
Mm-hmm.
To say I love the Beatles, or they're my favorite band. It's like saying that my mother is my favorite mother, or
Mm-hmm.
my wife is my favorite wife. It's not something I put a lot of thought into because it's cellular.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was to put a record down to listen to for pleasure, it would be something like XTC or um, uh, Stevie Wonder or things like that. Those are the things I really, really like. But the Beatles are more like, they're like family, and they've never met me.
Wow. That's a beautiful way to put it. Um, my dad and mom, my dad was in the Army, so we moved around a lot.
Mhm. Where are
And
you?
so I'm currently in Dallas, Texas.
Oh,
But like I was born in Louisiana. My dad was stationed in Kentucky, Germany, Louisiana. We moved around. My mom was a mom and daddy's girl. So anytime she could, she moved back to Louisiana. I counted up once. I went to 12 different schools between first and eighth grade.
oh, it must have been hard.
It was. And I discovered comic books very young. And someone was talking to me once that um, her theory, she was a counselor, she said that because I had no friends that I could count on, because I learned very quickly, as soon as you got too close to someone, you were going to move and you'd never see him again.
Mm-hmm.
And while that my friends in the four colors, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, were always there for me. And so that's why I developed this love of comic books and reading. And my mom to this day said that Jesse would give up food to buy a kid a book, because he wants him to have that passion and that feeling. um
How old are you?
I am 61. I was born
So,
in 59.
okay, do you know the recorded history of Spider-Man, like the albums?
Yes, a vague, not as much as probably you do, but enough. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I did one episode on those, like
Yeah.
the Spider-Man stuff with Stan Lee.
Yeah.
He like gave his blessing to one of the albums, and then there was the band Crack the Sky. Are you familiar with?
Yes.
So Crack the Sky was like the backing band for one of them and stuff like that. And I don't know as much about Spider-Man
Yeah.
as you do, but
Yeah.
but you know about it.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, vaguely. Yeah, that's interesting.
So that's the kind of thing, yeah, that the people don't play, or they're hardcore like you. They know about all those characters and all that stuff.
So, Gilbert, what why do you think, or what was the initial gem or kind of spark that said, hey, this would be an interesting show to do?
Wow, that's a good question, and I know the answer exactly. So when I was in Buffalo, I had a sales job um, back in the nascent stages of computer development,
Okay.
and a guy sitting in the cubicle next to me is still a friend of mine. His name was Mike, and he used to make me these tapes of like what we're talking about. Like he'd make me tapes of like Love You, and I'd never heard of it, or he'd make me tapes of Jan Hammer's band with Jan Hammer singing, or just crazy stuff. And I'd never heard it before, but it was so amusing to me, and so he was like a hero of mine. So we used to talk a lot about the fact that there was all this world of music where like once you didn't have a hit or once you had to fill out a B-side or whatever, there was this whole world of like not necessarily all bad. Like for instance, Stevie Wonder produced a couple of albums for his ex-wife Sarita, who later on had a #1 song with Billy Preston, "Woman, Don't You Know With You, I'm Born Again." But her two albums she did with Stevie are just amazing, and I don't think they went anywhere. But like that's the kind of stuff that we would talk about back and forth, and we loved the same stuff. We loved funk music and things like that. And then once I moved, I found myself in the car. Bad psychotic confession here, talking about I would do these little factoids. I would just say them in the car and think, I would be interested in this. And so I started to find these other shows like 365 Days with Otis Otter and Phil Milstein and Crap from the Past with Ron Boogie Monster Gerber from Minnesota. and I just was fascinated by things that just were not on the radio and things that nobody like would know. And it didn't interest me, um, uh, Leonard Skinner didn't interest me, but that was because they were successful, and I didn't think that anything that they did on their albums was going to be as interesting as something like Rotary Connection, who were crazy, interesting, versatile failures that didn't do too well, but I just find them more interesting. Um, uh, and so when someone in Hillsborough said that they were going to have a radio station, I just traipsed on down there and I said, "You got to do this show, because if you don't, I'm going to go crazy." And so WHUP graciously let me do a show for them on Saturday nights, and then later on, I got the idea of just taking all this stuff and filling it with some context on my podcast. And it's not the best, but it's an entertaining 2 hours if you like music that's not something you've heard before and maybe would never get heard, if it wasn't for people like the people I mentioned and me doing this stuff. So
What's
boy,
a
you're
couple, what's a
please go
couple
ahead.
what's a couple episodes that you're especially proud of? You mentioned the Spider-Man one. I imagine that's something pretty cool. What are a couple others that you, if someone was going to go sample, you're like, here's something you find interesting?
um I'm going through them right now because oh yeah, okay, I'll tell you the one I'm most proud of is the one that really got very few uploads, and that's the one I did on Kid Creole and the Coconuts,
Okay.
who came from Dr. Buzzard Savannah Band. They were like a disco group. They had a hit with Cherchez la Femme, but this Kid Creole guy was like a precursor to Prince. And some of their music is so unbelievable and it's so good. Some of it's not, but some of it's really unbelievable. And
Yeah.
I did a whole episode where I talked about Kid Creole, and mostly I talked about their live show from the 80s. They did these shows in New York in these places that were like concept shows, like where they would act out an entire sort of musical that this Kid Creole had written.
Mm-hmm.
And the band is just amazing. And I discovered but I discovered for myself all these things, and I like just dove into the Kid Creole. I'm not going to call it a zeitgeist because at their best, they were not that popular.
Right.
But I like it a lot because I learned a lot of things. I did a show about Bonnie Raitt, who's my favorite female singer.
One of Bruce's early supporters.
Is that so?
Yeah, he would often open for her, and he used to joke about she was his second favorite redhead because Patty, his current
Right.
wife, is redhead. Yes.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Bonnie was very supportive of Bruce early.
Another show of mine that I like, but I can't listen to. A lot of people, they get stuff off of YouTube.
Mhm.
But I actually found a library that sold. There was a record released in, I think, '69, and the single was called "The Prophet."
Okay.
And what it was a bunch of just a no band of nobodies singing this song about the prophet. It was kind of like a Monkees-esque sort of deal. And then in between like the choruses, this guy named David Hoy would speak these predictions. I predict that in 1994 a plane will crash, and it's just such a piece of 60s craziness that I had to look the guy up. And his first album is not available on YouTube, or it's not available on Amazon or anywhere, except for there's this library that charges you $10 for the privilege of downloading this entire album of this David Hoy making predictions. And I did. And that's another show that I like, because that one is combined with the band Translator from I think 81, 82, who I really like. Translator should have gone a lot farther. And so I play some of their stuff. And of course, Alex Harvey Band got a good reaction. The Sensational Alex Harvey Band show. Things like that I would never have given a chance when I was a young man, but now I just love. All of these acts have something special about them. I bought an album by a group called Hello People. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
So Hello People was formed in '67 by a producer who thought, since they're really good musicians, they should also try to mime. So they would do this in their stage show. They would do mime in their stage show. They released, I think, 7 albums from 1967 to 1980. They toured with Todd Rundgren. They were like, they'd open for Todd Rundgren, or they'd stay on stage with him when he was doing his tour and stuff. And it's just, mime rock and roll is like, they were before Kiss and they were before Alice Cooper, and nobody remembers who they were. They never recorded anything really great. And I have never heard anything of theirs, but I bought an album because I thought, this is something that no one's going to want. So have a home with me.
I love the idea that you're the island of misfit toys, with the Rudolph, Christmas special.
I want to be a dentist.
Yes. And, the idea that you've thrown together this collection of, never were, certainly one-hit wonders and other things that you find beauty in, in sharing. I think that's a really lovely thing.
Thank you. The band, by the way, I forgot to mention, was the Wayward Bus.
Okay.
So in the late '60s, the Wayward Bus did a record with David Hoy. So he did a few things. So and a lot of podcasts are much bigger than mine. I have passed 4,000 downloads, but that's not much, and I know that's not much.
Yeah.
But it's something. Things like I did a show. The Beatles came out with that album One.
Yes.
Which was like the greatest hits. So I did a whole show which fit actually perfectly in 2 hours, where every song was recorded by another artist.
Okay.
So Love Me Do was the Brady Bunch.
Okay.
Please Please Me was I can't remember who it was, but so I did a whole show like that. Artists like the Free Design, I really like. They were from near where I grew up in Buffalo, New York. So things like that. Yes. I just love those things.
They're the guys I had on, the son and father I had on last night. I can't remember which podcast they guested on, but there was one of the things is Untouchable. What are songs that should not be covered? And I'm like, man, that'd be bad for me because I'm a big fan of covers. I love hearing someone, and sometimes they're not good if they sound exactly like the band or they take it in a really crazy way. But I really, Sirius XM has a covers channel. And when I'm, not in the mood to listen to Bruce, I will go over to the covers channel and just, swim through that for a while just to enjoy. So I think that the covers of the Beatles would be interesting to do.
I'm trying to find that show right now.
Because Ken Rosen, who's a friend of the podcast, does a blog every day. And one of the things he routinely does is Cover Me, and where he either talks about Bruce covering a song or a band covering Bruce. And I have a whole YouTube channel for myself of all these Bruce covers that sometimes I'll just put on and play just to hear just the different people's takes on the songs. It's just interesting.
So obviously, who was it? I did a show on, let's see, it wasn't Little Stevie. It was, who did I Don't Want to Go Home? Who did?
Southside Johnny.
Southside Johnny. So, he did that song. I think
Yeah.
Fever was it called?
Yes.
But unlike other artists, as far as Bruce Springsteen is concerned, I played some of the stuff from his old band, which was called, help me,
The Castiles or Steel Mill.
Steel Mill,
yeah.
Steel Mill, and One by the Castiles and stuff.
Okay.
But I closed that section by playing 4 songs of his that I think everybody knows. And the one I played, The River, last, because while I'm not as a big Springsteen fan, that song really, really is very good. It's very, maybe that's one of the songs that people shouldn't cover because, because usually I try to find the seedy underbelly of every artist, but with Bruce, I just went back before he was a solo artist, and then I played his version of Blinded by the Light. But then I played the River and some other big songs from the 80s.
So his latest album, I don't know if you're aware of this, he just put out a new album in October and Letter to You, and 3 of the songs were that he had written in the early 70s. And they kind of they recorded them and put them up, and they're very interesting. If I Was a Priest is one of my favorites. So you may go to Spotify and check that out, Letter to You, and he's picked up a few songs. It's
he did that. I'm sorry, one more thing about him. He sang that version of Erie Canal.
Yes.
So when we were kids, they made us sing Erie Canal. And I just thought his version was just so good. I mean, everything he does is classic.
Yeah, that Seeger Session album was very interesting because, my father, would play on the guitar Froggy Went a Courtin', right? And I do remember singing Erie Canal and, Oh Dan Tucker.
Did you sing Erie Canal in Louisiana?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, that's
news to me. Jeez.
Yeah, we would do that. Yeah, the folk do, in it, Old Dan Tucker, we would sing that in elementary school. It was Kentucky, so maybe that's why, because it was in Kentucky.
Didn't sing that one,
yeah, so that's interesting.
You were going to ask a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna. What do you have any specific future plans, or you just want to keep doing this and having fun?
I just want to keep doing this and having fun. When I pitched the idea for the show, I guess the manager of the station asked me how long I could go, and I figured I'd probably go 3 years with the music that I have, but there's no end to it. I mean,
so how long have you been doing it?
This October will be 6 years.
Wow.
So like today, for instance, and this I think speaks to that fact that do you remember Daddy Dewdrop?
No.
So Daddy Dewdrop had a hit with Chicka Boom Chicka Boom. Don't you just love it?
Yes, I remember. Okay, I know the song, didn't know the artist. Right.
So no one does. I mean, but that artist kept recording, and that artist actually did a disco record, which I'm going to be playing on my next show, my next live show. So I'm taking a couple weeks off. So people like Cilla Black or Andy Williams, of course, or Little Nell. Do you know who that is?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
So Little Nell was in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Okay.
And she did a disco record. Curtis Mayfield did a disco record. Donnie and Marie, of course, did a disco record. The Osmonds did a disco record produced by Maurice Gibb, which they did not mention in the special.
They did not in the documentary. Yes. You know what? Similar. We just were talking about this. The guy who runs my network, Rob and I were having a meeting, and he said, funny story. When you told me you were going to do a Springsteen podcast, he says, we got off the phone, and I told my wife, Martha, who's his co-owner, partner. He said, "Hey, Jesse wants to do a Springsteen fan podcast. I think we'll get a year out of it." And September was 5 years. I've had over 600 shows, and so, yeah,
that's a lot of shows.
It is a lot of talk about, but one of the things, Gilbert, that has kind of kept it fresh is having people like yourself that aren't necessarily massive Springsteen fans, but they are passionate about other music, and sharing that has kind of kept it fun and kept it going.
You gotta respect someone like him who.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned was that he was not an overnight success. He worked really hard, and he heard a lot of no. And, and that made me respect him even more. But
it is. He talks about that, and in this latest album, there's a documentary on Apple TV. But what was the genesis for this latest album is the last remaining live band member, the Castiles, died a couple of years ago. And Bruce was there, visited him toward the end of his life, and was talking to him. And when he passed away, it hit Bruce that I'm the last man standing, that this band that I had played in high school, I'm the only one left alive. And that kind of spurned the political. And so he does a song, Last Man Standing, and I'll See You in My Dreams is one of my favorite songs, where he talks about death is not the end, and I will see you in my dreams. It's really beautiful. What have I not asked you that I should have, Gilbert?
Maybe there are extremes. There are artists I like, and there are artists I don't like. There are artists I'm prejudiced against.
Yeah.
People like Neil Diamond. I'll never like Neil Diamond. I don't care how successful he was. I'll never like him.
Is it just the voice? Is it the cadence, or just?
No, it's the fact that. First of all, he did a song called the Pot Song. Did you ever hear that?
No. So
it's just awful. It's just awful. It's like, he's like the anti-rock star in that he was one of those people who pointed his finger at people who were smoking marijuana and saying, "Boy, they don't look silly doing that," And he was the jazz singer, and he also did disco records that nobody ever heard, and he did a just awful cover of "Dancing in the Streets," which is a great song. Maybe people should cover it because it's a pretty simple song, but it's easy to get those things wrong.
Right.
Like I said, my favorite artists that I've discovered doing the show are artists like the Free Design and Sarita Wright. I have respect for the Bee Gees, and people should have respect for them.
Yes,
because they wrote just so many songs that other people made better, but they wouldn't have made it better if they didn't exist.
Exactly.
How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? Who did that? Was it Al Green or someone who did that?
Yeah.
But it's just, for me, the show is leaning toward more and dirtier underbelly, which is to say there are awful lot of missteps. I mean, someone like Bruce Johnston.
Yeah, Johnston.
I played some of his solo album.
Yeah.
And he just seems like a car salesman to me. A really nice one.
Right. Like, what's interesting, right? I really like Disney Girls. That's one of, the song that his, but
that version of it. Yes.
Yes.
The one on Sunflower.
Yeah. but
Or was it what was
yeah,
the
no, I
okay,
think it was Sunflower. But then, right, like he wrote, I write the songs,
right.
which
Hmm.
I think is hilarious. That what people would consider one of the f- perfect textbook Barry Manilow songs
Hmm.
is a song not written by Barry Manilow, who
Right.
is himself a prolific songwriter.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, that was like the first version recorded was by Captain and Tennille.
right?
And if any group should be known as the Beach Boys 2, it should be the Captain and Tennille,
Absolutely,
but everybody thinks of them as Love Will Keep Us Together and
yeah,
Muskrat Love. And although
yeah,
that was a pretty kick-ass production for 1975 radio, Love Will Keep Us Together is a pretty
yes,
innovative single,
absolutely, yes,
and people just take it for granted. And
yeah.
the Dennis Wilson was doing things like that, but the Beach Boys sure weren't.
No,
You know,
no. In fact, I remember when Carl quit the band and did a couple of solo albums. They're very dated,
very dated, very
very
dated.
dated. But I remember the excitement of buying that first. It was an album, and just exciting because it's new Beach Boy material and
Was it
different.
Young Blood?
No, the one before, Carl
Oh,
Wilson. Youngblood
okay.
was I did not like as much, but the first one, Carl Wilson, and so great story, Gilbert. I'm living in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm dating um, the lady who is now my wife, Linda, and her brother lived in Dallas, Texas. And so we as a family went to go visit Ralph and Robin in, Dallas. And I get the Dallas paper and I see that Carl Wilson is playing in Dallas that night on the solo tour, right? And so I'm like looking at Linda like, okay, I've got to go. Like, I know this is family time, but there's no way I'm
Right.
not going to see. And we did. Linda and I went. We got to see him. It was amazing to see him perform solo.
Hmm.
He did very few. I think he Long Promised Road. I think might have been the only Beach Boy song he did. He
Hmm.
did all solo material.
Was it with a band or just
Yeah, it
him
was with a
solo?
band. Yeah,
Was okay.
and
Was
then
Ricky Fattar in the band?
no, it wasn't. Um, and so I think anyway, the point is you're right that it Captain and Tennille, right, were because they were part of the touring Beach Boy bands for a while.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Captain was, Daryl was.
Hmm.
Um, so this is out of just um, hold your put your seatbelt on because I don't want you to get whiplash. But you were talking about different people. What I find amazing, and I grew up, like I said, 74, 75. I'm in junior high, freshman in high school. I'm listening to my AM radio, my clock radio. Top 40 radio was it for me, right?
Hmm.
And um, like everyone else, I adored John Denver back then,
Hmm.
right? And I think it's weird. I could get why he's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
Hmm.
even though as a pop star, he certainly is anyone else that they've talked about.
Oh,
But
he
he's
was
not.
untouchable.
Yeah, he also isn't in the country western Hall of Fame. And it's
It,
just maybe just because he's uncool.
I think it's because he transcended music to become sort of ubiquitous in
Yeah,
showbiz, and that sort of made it. I'm not going to say people took it for granted, but
yeah,
maybe it lowered his esteem in some
yeah,
people's eyes. I mean, Rocky Mountain High is just about smoking marijuana, sitting around a
yeah,
fire. Everybody's high. Rocky
yeah.
Mountain High. That's how the high
Right.
they are. And another thing is maybe it was because he signed that Starland Vocal Band to his record label. Maybe that's why. Because I would punish him for that.
One of my favorite moments of TV is Sports Night. One of the first one of the first few episodes, Aaron Sorkin's show, and the character is Dan has to apologize because he had specifically said something wrong, and so on the apology, he talks about his brother being high and dying in a car wreck, and that's why he remembered the date. And it's a very touching moment. And earlier in the show, Casey, his partner, had talked about that. How is the Starland Vocal Band not cool? Because I have their Grammys greatest hits CD, and he said that alone makes it not cool. And so you can see this, but Dan's apology, Casey comes over, and you just think he's going to say, "Look, I appreciate you bearing your soul," and he goes, the Grammys voted them the best, and Afternoon Delight is playing, and it is a great moment of music. So yeah, they had think about it, one hit wonder, had a summer replacement show.
Yeah. Was Murray Langston on that show? Or?
I think he may have been.
So yeah. Their follow-up to that was, I don't know if it was a follow-up or a B-side to the follow-up, was called Liberated Woman.
Okay.
Have you heard it?
No.
So that's like, it's like the Metal Machine music of yacht rock.
Yes.
It's just Bill Danoff wrote it, talking about a liberated woman, and she's going to do this, and is it okay if I don't do the dishes tonight? It's just awful stuff. And they did like 3 or 4 records,
Yeah.
Do you like Chicago? Did you
sure
like Chicago?
I was that high school.
To Carl Wilson.
Absolutely. Yeah, Carl Wilson, they toured Color My World, and just does anyone know what time it is? Absolutely. One of my best concert memories was living in Dallas. So this would have been late 80s, maybe early 90s. I can't remember if Chris had been born or not, but it was an outdoor concert, and Chicago and the Beach Boys were touring together. Brian wasn't touring at the time with them, of course, but Chicago opened, played, a lot of hits. Then the Beach Boys played, and then the encore was the Beach Boys and Chicago playing together. And so you had the horns on some of the Beach Boy songs, and you had the Beach Boy harmony on some of the Chicago songs, and that was a fun show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I saw them in 82.
Yeah.
They were in the Round. There was a theater in Buffalo called Melody Fair.
Yeah.
So that was their comeback tour with the full support of Full Moon Records and David Foster.
Yeah.
But I gotta tell you, another favorite show of mine.
Okay.
Oops, didn't mean to do that. Is a show I did about Major Bill Smith.
Okay.
Do you know who that is?
No, I do not.
So Major Bill Smith was the guy who he produced like 3 number 1 songs in the 60s. One of them was Bruce Chanel's Hey Baby. So you know it's all right.
Yes.
Hey baby. So this Major Bill Smith, I did a whole like a half show about him releasing singles about Elvis being alive.
Oh wow.
Even though he had died. And Bruce Channel, he actually recorded a song called Requiem for Elvis, where Bruce would sing like snippets from Elvis's hits, and then Major Bill Smith would intercede with, did you ever notice that Elvis was this or that? Trying to like put doubt in your mind that Elvis might really be alive. Oh, the king is gone, but we'll never forget him. And it's just so I did a whole. Fun. So yeah, that's the kind of show I really like.
That sounds great.
And it's hard to dig this stuff up, and it's hard to find it.
How much work do you put in for your 2-hour show, do you think?
I would say about 5 hours a show.
I can imagine.
Because it's sad to say, and this is why I don't have any friends, but I know a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So I dug up every version of Bruce Chanel's Hey Baby. He did like 5 of them. One in 68, and Paul and Paula, who did Hey Paula, you know that song?
Sure.
They did a disco version
House. Yeah.
Right. They did a disco version of that in 1975, and things like that. I did a show about Freddie Cannon. You know who that is, right?
Sure.
Because you know the song Palisades Park that the
Right.
Beach Boys covered.
Yes.
So he was a hit in the early '60s, Palisades Park and Tallahassee Lassie, and but he kept going and he kept going and he kept going and he would like try to. He did disco and it's really uncomfortable to hear a 40-year-old man like grunting and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I actually bought one of his singles that he released in '81, which was do you know the song Hello Mudda, Hello Fada?
Sure. He
did like a version of that, but like a comedy skit about some supermarket.
Oh, how funny.
And I'm just thinking, you know, what happened to Freddie Cannon to make this happen in his mind? You know, like, let's get everybody together. We got to do this. We got to do this. It'll be great. You know,
this is great. It'll be genius.
Right. That's the stuff I really like.
So once again, tell us the name of the show and how to find it.
Go to dsides, no dash, .podbean.com, or on Saturday nights at 6, my show is on whupfm.org, and it's called D-Sides, Orphans, and Oddities.
Okay.
A lot of fun.
That sounds great.
Just like I'm talking now.
That sounds wonderful. Okay, before I let you go, I got to ask you the Mary question.
The what?
So I hope I gave you the homework. If I didn't, I'll have to have you come on again.
Okay.
So the song Thunder Road. Bruce Springsteen, Thunder Road.
Yeah.
Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. He just recently retired. And he has his seniors spend 2 days breaking apart the song Thunder Road. They look at all the lyrics, they look at the imagery, they look at the themes Bruce explores. And then at the end of the 2 days, he asks the class, does Mary get in the car? So that's your question, Gilbert. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Yes.
Okay.
Resigned.
Right?
Yeah.
Resigned?
Yeah.
She doesn't do it joyfully. She just like, I've got nothing else.
I don't think anybody does anything under those circumstances joyfully.
Okay. Very nice. Very good. I appreciate that. That's a good answer.
But I gave you homework too.
Yes.
So
Smart Girls. I got
Smart Girls by Brian Wilson.
Yes, I am going to check that out almost immediately.
Okay.
Gilbert, this was so much fun.
Yeah, fun.
Please, please reach out again if you think of like, you know, I'm going to do a Bruce themed. I know that's out of your normal range, but if you have something where, you know, because Bruce was very influenced, you know, Sam and Dave and all these people. He is very vocal about the early roots of rock and roll, Roy Orbison, everything, how much they meant to him. So if you ever think of that, or if you just say, hey, Jesse, I've got a crazy show I want to promote, reach out to me and let me know, because I'd love to have you on again.
Thank you so much. I will do that.
Very good. All right. Are you on social media?
The podcast is the social media, but you can find me. My name is Gilbert Neal, Neal. So if you're either an FBI agent trying to track me down or an old girlfriend who says I have a child now, just please look me up. You'll find me.
What do you know the Twitter handle for the show?
At Mr. Gilbert Neal. No spaces.
Okay, good. All right, I will include that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gilbert Neal, not Mr. Mr. Gilbert Neal.
Yeah. All right, listeners, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Please go check out Gilbert's podcast. Sample it. Let him know. Give him feedback. Tell him you heard about it here. Please be safe. Remember to wash your hands. Remember to social distance. Remember to wear an effing mask. And let's all be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Yep. For now, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Thank you to my patrons who help support the show. It is greatly appreciated. I want to thank Betsy Hodges, Levi Petrie, Elizabeth Bronson, Stephen Malio, Holly Mack, Steve Rogers, Dale Hosick, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, and my first patron, Mary Thomas. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support you give me. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.